In April of 1951, somewhere in Western Europe, the exact facility remains classified. A man sat in a chair. He had been told he was participating in a medical evaluation. He did not know who had arranged it. Between 1951 and 1953, the CIA's Project Artichoke conducted interrogation experiments on unwitting human subjects, including U.S. citizens, to determine whether it was possible to engineer a person who would commit an act they could not consciously remember. The project did not begin as Artichoke. It began as Bluebird. CIA Director Alan Dulles formally approved Project Bluebird in April of 1950. The stated purpose was defensive. The CIA wanted to understand Soviet and Chinese interrogation methods. They wanted to know whether American personnel could be psychologically conditioned against them. This was the justification written into the paperwork. It was the version that moved through official channels. Bluebird became Artichoke in August of 1951. The name changed. The ambition expanded. Artichoke was administered through the CIA's Office of Security and its technical services staff. Researchers worked at facilities in Europe and Asia, locations chosen in part because they existed outside the legal jurisdiction of the United States. The operational framework combined three tools: hypnosis, sodium pentothal, and amphetamines. Sodium pentothal is a barbiturate. Administered intravenously, it produces a state of reduced inhibition. The subject becomes compliant. They answer questions they might otherwise refuse. Amphetamines were used to counteract sedation and to prolong the usable window of the interrogation. Hypnosis was layered on top. The combination was not theoretical. It was tested on people. The subjects were not volunteers in any meaningful sense. Church committee investigators confirmed in 1975 that Artichoke experiments were conducted on prisoners, mental patients, and foreign nationals. These were individuals who had no capacity to give informed consent. Some did not speak English. Some did not know they were in CIA custody. Some did not know they were in any kind of custody at all. The Church Committee was a Senate Select Committee. Its findings were not speculative. They were drawn from documents the CIA had not yet destroyed. The most precise record of what Artichoke looked like in practice comes from a classified memo dated 1952. It was later declassified and is held at the National Security Archive. The document describes a session with an unwitting subject. Researchers placed him in a hypnotic trance. They then gave him a cover identity. This identity overrode his own stated name and background. Under hypnosis, he responded to the new identity as though it were his own. He did not resist it. He did not appear to recognize the replacement. When researchers addressed him by the false name, he answered. When they asked him about his history, he gave the history they had constructed. His own name, when presented to him, produced no recognition. The memo does not record what happened when he came out of the trance. It does not record whether he was told what had occurred. The session is described in the language of a clinical procedure. Dosages are noted. Timing is noted. The subject's responses are noted. What is absent from the document is any language suggesting this gave anyone pause. CIA Officers working on Artichoke were explicit, in writing, about what they were attempting to determine. Declassified documents show they discussed whether a so-called Manchurian candidate was achievable. The term they used was not borrowed from fiction. The fiction came later. What these officers wrote in internal memos was a serious operational question. Could a person be conditioned to carry out a mission and then retain no conscious memory of it? Could the action be real while the knowledge of it was removed? This was not a philosophical exercise. They were trying to find out if the answer was yes. What does not fit the official narrative is not dramatic. It is granular. Artichoke's stated defensive purpose is difficult to reconcile with the 1952 memo. You do not need to build a cover identity into a person to understand Soviet interrogation techniques. You do not need to replace someone's name with a false one to develop resistance training. The experimental design described in that document is not defensive in its orientation. It is, by structure, an attempt to exert control over a subject's sense of self. The subjects selected also require attention. Prisoners and mental patients were not chosen because they were the most useful research population for a defensive program. They were chosen because they were the least likely to report what had been done to them. Foreign nationals held outside U.S. jurisdiction were chosen for the same reason. The selection criteria tell you something about what the researchers expected the subjects might want to say afterward. There is also the question of what was not found. When the Church Committee investigated in 1975, CIA Director Richard Helms had already ordered the destruction of MK Ultra files in 1973. Artichoke predated MK Ultra. Some of its records survived. Many did not. What investigators reconstructed came from budget documents, routing slips, and memos that had been misfiled in the wrong cabinets. The picture they assembled was incomplete by design. What remained was enough to confirm the program existed, and enough to confirm its methods. What exactly was achieved in those sessions, in those facilities, with those subjects, was gone. The man in the chair in 1951 responded to a name that was not his. He described a life he had not lived. He sat in a room he had not chosen to enter. The record of what he said exists in a document in an archive. The record of who he was before he walked into that room does not appear to have been preserved. No one has ever established with certainty how many sessions were conducted. No one has publicly confirmed what happened to the subjects afterward. The program ended, officially, in 1953. What was learned from it passed directly into the architecture of MK Ultra, and from there into decades of classification. What we do not know is whether the question those officers were trying to answer, whether a person could act and then not know they had acted, was ever answered in the negative.